What would you say about children's having contact with a father like that when he was abusive towards your mother? How does that make you feel? And do you feel like it was that they should have divorced, but the contact should have still been there? Do you feel like it was safe for you to visit? What do you think about how
Yeah,
that?
well, I think that divorce should be that #1 priority. That way the kids don't succumb to watching that sort of stuff happening. But I think that the other parent should be still allowed to see the child as long as they're not hurting the child. When it does come to a situation where the parent lets the child drink, then steps should be made to help that parent understand that that's not okay. And if you want to continue seeing the child, then we need to change
Right.
what's happening here. Instead of just cutting them off from the child straight up and not being allowed to see them and all
So
that sort of
yes,
stuff.
sever the
Whereas with
marriage,
that,
but not the
yeah,
children's relationships, unless they cannot correct.
yeah,
their
give them
behavior.
the chance to correct their parenting before taking that child.
So do you think that your dad, if he'd been offered that opportunity to like get some help, get some parenting classes, maybe do some work around the domestic violence and why he was being triggered around that, and learn how to do all that aggression, violence sort of work, like rein it in, understand it, do work around it, try and stop doing it, as well as learn how to be a parent. And then if he was offered to be able to see you kids at the time, do you think that that would have helped him?
If he'd gotten all that support, it would have helped him, I truly believe. But also, I think if it was a private support, he would have actually probably come at it, opposed to people knowing that he was getting that support.
Okay, so you're talking about court mandated support versus he's offered it quietly without being forced into it. He was offered it. Do you believe he would have stepped into the space? Because the other one carries a lot of stigma and shame, and when the authorities step in and it's court mandated courses and all that sort of stuff, that's a very different mindset you need to come in with. And it's
because my dad was really, he was sort of a private person in that way, like he didn't open up and sort of thing. But I think that comes from his family, like they hid stuff, you know what I mean, like things weren't allowed to be out in the open. And I think if he was to be forced into getting some sort of help like that, he would have been frowned upon by his family, because it would have brought shame to the family and that type of stuff. Whereas if he was privately offered that, to go to counselling and that without anybody else knowing, without his family knowing, that type of stuff, I think he would have been more open to that.
Okay, that's very interesting perspective, actually, Tessa. Really interesting perspective, and very valuable too, because the courts don't often take into consideration the child. Do you find that, Dawn, like when they're making these decisions, or the child's need to be with that other parent, and how to facilitate that in a safe, healthy way?
So there's times where they don't consider the child's opinion, and then there's times that they give them too much opinion. And I think that a child does not have the capacity to make the decision of removing a parent. And I don't think they should be given the choice, because they don't get to choose whether or not they go to school. They don't get to choose whether or not they, have to listen to their parents. So why would they be given a choice to remove a parent? And I just think that's so detrimental to that. That's such a burden for a child.
And also in that situation, the courts now, like, they don't really know both parents personally. And so one of the parents, that the courts are looking at to keeping the child with and removing the other parent sort of thing, that one parent could be manipulating that child into saying they don't want to see that other
Which
parent.
happens a lot. That's definitely
Yeah.
very common. And the problem with that is that that's when that parent would actually put that pressure on the child to make the decision. Well, she doesn't want to see her mom, or
Yeah.
she doesn't
And
want to see her dad, and that's
Yeah.
putting their voice on top of theirs, and it's basically taking away the child's voice, who shouldn't have to express it at that age. In my opinion, I think that children's voices we're the children's voices now, right? And what we're saying is that children need both parents.
Absolutely.
They're not capable of making that drastic of a life-altering a decision that could change the course of their entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they do need both parents, unless there is, extensive reasons why that other
if there
parent
would be
should be
harm to the
involved.
child, definitely.
Yes.
I think that
If the
has
child's being harmed, absolutely, sexually, psychologically, like all sorts of different things. It's all domestic and family violence. They're all serious, and it needs to be handled a little bit differently, because for those of us, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience with what Dawn was just talking about there, because you were nodding an awful lot. So yeah.
Well,
What was coming?
Bobblehead.
The emotional abuse, sorry, the emotional abuse should be included in that as well. So the alienating parent is just as abusive as a physical abusive parent. And
Yes.
even more so, because when you're physically abused, you feel the pain right then. And then as time goes on, that pain kind of dissipates. You remember the act, but you don't necessarily remember the pain. The emotional part of it is the continuance. You're carrying that pain with you. That's the pain. And because it doesn't go away, that is, mentally, emotionally abusive, which should still be considered child abuse.
I think I found, even so, my dad allowed me to drink, which is a type of abuse with a child, because, I was 8, and that when he started to let me drink and stuff. But I found, to me personally, that was nowhere near as bad as my mum's emotional abuse and the mental abuse sort of thing, when it came to her blaming me for dad's physical abuse towards her and stuff, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
I found mum's emotional side more detrimental to me than dad let me have a drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's psychologically or emotionally abusive as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you feel comfortable to just speak about that, about what was happening with your mother, or you don't have to if you don't want to, but can you give us an example of what
what she used to say to me and how I felt her.
Yeah.
Well, we'd constantly get into arguments. I think the last time I actually had an argument with her was about a year ago about this exact same thing, about her. She'd always come up with these comments when it came along to talking about dad, because she'd say, "Oh, your dad's nothing but an arsehole," and all that type of stuff, because he was a woman basher and an alcoholic and rah-rah-rah, and I'd say, well, he never hurt me. I know he hurt you, and I understand that, but he never hurt me, and sort of thing, so you can't take that away from me. He's still my dad, I still love him, type of things. And then she'd always say, yeah, well, of course you'd say that you're daddy's little girl, and you were the reason why he bashed me a lot of the times, and type of things. Well, how's it my fault? And she'd be like, right from when you was 1 year old, you knew what you was doing, and you'd I tell you to eat your tea and you didn't want it, so you'd go and tell your dad, knowing that he would come and punish me for it, and rah-rah-rah, and, you know, like, just, you know, it'd just be constant, like, and it still happens, these conversations, till this day. Like I said, probably a year ago was the last time I had this conversation. Like, I ended up having a bit of a breakdown and saying, you know, like, do you understand, like, what this shit does to me emotionally? Like, when you sit there and constantly blame me, sorry, and, like, she still couldn't comprehend, like, how it made me feel being told in my life that it was my fault, the reason she was constantly hit all the time.
That's an immense
You know,
amount of a burden to put on you.
me at 1 year old, I manipulated my dad and I made him do it, and, you know, like, I, you know, basically set it all up to happen all the time, sort of thing.
Can I say something to you right here? Because this is what I thought as soon as you started talking about this, is that it was your mom that chose him, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Did you choose your father?
Exactly.
You didn't choose your father. She chose your father. She made that choice. She made these decisions. It is her that she owns that decision. You have nothing to do with any of that. It's not your fault at all. There's no fault on you at all.
Yeah. I know that now. Like, you know, when I was growing up, though, I had a lot of trouble come to terms with it, trying to figure out, you know, how it was my fault. Like, you know, because to me it was like, well, you know, I'm just saying I don't want to eat that. Like, you know, like, what's wrong with that, you know, sort
Like
of thing.
any child
You know?
does. How many times do we turn our nose up? I'm not eating peas. I don't want carrots. I mean, that's a child. That's what children do. They don't want the yucky stuff.
Yeah.
Well, honey, as that that whole eating incident, the trauma, has that played out in your adulthood in the form of any kind of eating disorder or anything for you? You don't have to answer this if you don't want to.
I'm still a very picky eater. I'm very picky. Like, say, like, if I buy potato salad or something from the supermarket, like, I have to eat it by the next day, otherwise I throw it out. Like, I can't comprehend eating it the day after or anything like that. My mum, when I was younger, she used to force feed me my teas, and quite a few times I vomited all over her, and then I got punished for vomiting on her because she stuck the fork too far down my throat, and it made me vomit. Spaghetti bolognese was one of her big things because I guess it was a cheap, easy meal for us kids, and she didn't have much money. And I still cannot stand the sight of spaghetti bolognese. Because
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but can you talk about the fork a little bit more? That she shoved it down your throat so far it made you throw up.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
You know when stuff hits you at the back of your throat and you die reach and like gag and whatnot?
Gag reflex.
Yeah.
Was she intentionally trying to put the fork? I mean, most children don't need the fork put back that far. They usually open their mouths and take the food. So how did the fork?
Well, because I was refusing to eat, so she would forcibly open my mouth and shove the fork in my mouth. And I can remember this, like, even when I was like 8 and stuff, just before they split up, she'd do it and I'd throw up, and then I'd get sent to my room with no tea for the night. And so I used to jump out my bedroom window and go next door to the people next door and ask them for food.
Oh my goodness. And how old were you?
I was 8.
What sort of food did you like to eat if you went to the neighbours' food? Like, what was it? What was happening that you didn't like the food there, but would you eat there at the neighbours'? And if so, what sort of food?
They used to cook with some baked potatoes and stuff like that. I still like baked potatoes, and because I used to do homemade chips, and one of the girls next door, like one of the kids that I grew up with, her name's Kim, and she used to cut up the potatoes, but they're like really thick potatoes, like for chips.
Chunky
And
ones. Chunky
yeah,
chips.
really
Okay,
chunky
so
chips.
it wasn't that you weren't eating, it's just that you liked specific kinds of food. So
Yeah.
did you ever develop anorexia or bulimia or anything? You don't have to answer this either. This is just me with my psych hat on because I find this really interesting. So
No, I never
okay,
like,
that's lucky.
you know, deliberately threw up foods or anything like that, but I do have a sensory problem.
Right.
And I
Okay.
suffer chronic reflux, which I had an operation for in 2015. They fixed all my food valves and everything up from the severe throwing up.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I'd throw my food up constantly.
Okay. Okay. So do you think that as a little one intuitively you knew not to eat specific foods? They were easier to swallow, they were easier to digest, and that was actually what was going on? It wasn't just that you were being a difficult child, and then
Yeah,
the consequence was mum would force feed you, and then she would blame you. Like if you didn't want to eat, you'd go to dad, and then dad would become violent, and then mum would be like, this is all your fault, Tessa. So this really interesting cyclical
and
maladaptive pattern played out in
a lot of time I'll go to bed with no tea because I couldn't eat the food she gave me. And I think that's why I'm different with my children. I don't force them to eat certain foods and stuff.
Any food allergies at all?
Well, I don't drink milk and stuff like that. Very rarely I have like a cup of Milo. But like my son Sam, he's got sensory problems, which I'm finally just about to get a ASD confirmation and a sensory confirmation, and that we've just done testing in the last couple of weeks for all of that.
Now it's all making a lot of sense.
And because Sam is the same as me, if you put spaghetti bolognese or something in front of him, he'll just start gagging straight away.
Okay.
And that's what I do.
My son used to do the same thing. Spaghetti, pasta, and he still to this day will not eat pasta. And he has developed somewhat of a food allergy to, we think it's gluten. He hasn't been tested, so I'm just going to say we think it's gluten because he gets canker sores really bad. I get them once in a while too. And I get them especially if I eat nuts. And so that's my reasoning of thinking of a food allergy, where your body often knows what it needs and what it shouldn't have. And until I started listening to my own body, like now I can tell if I've eaten something that it's not going to go well. But before you just eat it because it was put in front of you and you were told eat it, finish, and clean off your plate. And
see, I've been like that since I was a kid. I've thrown up food ever since I can remember.
And see, that's why you've ended up having these surgeries more than likely, because that acid is coming up. So
I
have that.
I ended up having an anterior wrap of the stomach and a hiatus hernia done. And it was in 2015, and they told me at the time that they don't normally do that operation unless you're over 50 because it's a high risk operation, and they see that if you've lived to being 50, it doesn't matter if you die after that during the surgery.
Yeah, fine.
But I was 34, I think I was 34 when I had the operation, and they did mine because apparently through all the throwing up and that through the years, all the acids and that, the chronic reflux and that I have, apparently I've got severe damage between my throat and my stomach, and it's very scarred and that, and I'm now high risk for throat and stomach cancer. So that's the only reason they actually did my operation. So
Oh my gosh, if we ever did your ACEs score, which we possibly should, that'll be very, very interesting to see what you score on the ACEs.
Yeah.
That's the Adverse Childhood Experiences study for anybody who will be watching this.
That
You
would be
go on there and add up all your adverse experiences, and then out of 10 you'll get a score, and that the research that was done will, depending on what score you get, you'll be prone to certain diseases when you're older. So
it's
that's
interesting to add the food question to that.
yes. Yeah, very, very interesting. So that's full on. So and the tricky thing is, like, if you'd been to see or been sent to a family systems therapist, a lot of this stuff could have been sorted out and noticed if we'd done a genogram with your family to see what exactly was going on. And your family could have been helped in a very, very big way. So in the
like I said, my
meantime,
mum never even took me to a therapist, even with my outbursts and that. You know, obviously the constantly gagging and throwing up, all my outbursts and that, I guess from her blaming me for dad and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I'm
I
thinking
never
if they had gone to a family systems therapist, like your mum, your dad, kids, gone to a family systems therapist who worked and had a look at the entire family system and all the intergenerational trauma coming through, and how that was playing out, especially with you, your life could have been quite different.
Yeah, and I truly believe that, and that's why I'm now already getting Sam, who's 10, into seeing a psychologist and that, to try and sort him out, because I don't want him to suffer like I did growing up, like, because, you know, I see a lot of him in me, like, or a lot of me in him, the way he acts and stuff. And I think if Mum had have, you know, at least gotten a counsellor for me or something, you know, while I was still a child, I probably wouldn't have gone down the route of, you know, smoking weed and that when I was younger, and all the drinking and, you know, all the wagging school and, you know, all that type of stuff. Maybe I could have been like a huge fashion designer by now.
There's still time, honey, because that's what you're good at. There's still time, I'm telling you. That, especially for children, adult children of parental alienation, if you talk to any of us, a lot of us don't end up finding ourselves till we're a lot older and going back to school. It seems to be a very big pattern. Hey, Dawn.
Yeah, and you already are a fashion designer.
Yeah, exactly. You already are. Look at your little Forever Angel gowns.
I mean, that dress is beautiful, the gown. Or,
yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Excuse me.
You can always just enroll in fashion school whenever you feel the need, through TAFE, etc., etc. You know, if you want it enough, you go after it. You're a young woman. There's plenty of time for you, honey. But if you were to talk to other, like, give a message to other kids who are adult, kids of divorce and separation, ACODs, like we all are, and yours sounds pretty full on, what message would you give? How about you give a message to the court system first, if you could think of one?
Well, to the court systems, I think before you act. Maybe dig a little bit more into getting to know both parents personally, their backgrounds, trying to figure out whether both parents are abusing the child or manipulating the child, whether one parent can privately be helped instead of publicly, so they're not feeling shamed or being shamed by their family. You know, work towards, you know, helping both parents be the best parents they can be.
Yep.
Do you have any questions, Dawn?
I like what she said, because I think parents need to learn how to parent separately. And I don't think we teach that. So when they're going through a divorce and there's no alternative, then they need to know how to parent separately. Oh, is that a Russian gray?
Blue Russian. But she's got a bit of grey in it, but it's more blue, but it's a blue-grey, silverish.
Yeah. I had one that was
Beautiful.
part that and part Siamese. So it was like the negative of a Siamese cat where the dark was light. Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
So do you have
you can
any
see more
messages?
blue of her in person.
Yeah. Do you have any messages for adult survivors of parental alienation?
Yeah, I'll get into it in a second. Well, I think if you are a parent who has been alienated by the other parent, stay strong, focus on the outcome, get resources as much as you can. If possible, do some courses and all that sort of stuff. I completed like a reason for change course. There's some courses like that, so jump on board, do a few of them. Make sure the courts can't stop you from seeing your child. Produce all the evidence, of all the changes that you've made in your life to make sure you can continue seeing your child.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tessa.
And how about 2 other children like us?
Well,
Like,
my advice to you guys is
reuniting, or they're not sure that they want to, or they don't even know this has happened.
Yeah,
okay.
because
Yep.
there's plenty of us out there who don't know what's happened.
Yep. Okay. For all you guys out there, just remember to stay strong. You got this. Look into the backgrounds. See if you can find any court documents or anything stating the reasons why the other parent has been taken from your life. Maybe even a possibility of reaching out to that other parent just to confirm, whether the stories are true, and hopefully they are true and they've been exaggerated and manipulated, and hopefully you can yourself go back to court with the other parent in order to see the other parent.
Yeah.
Don't always take one side of the parents. Look at both sides.
Exactly, because I think it's very important, if you want to heal, that you need both sides of the story. You need that other parent to actually answer those questions. So
Yes.
it's inevitable that you reconnect at least long enough to find out those answers.
Yes.
And what was life like
good or bad?
What was life like when you stayed in Tasmania after you were a little bit older and you lived with your dad? What was life like for you after that with him?
I loved it. Because like I said, I was never abused by him or anything. He tried to make me go to school and all that sort of stuff when I got back. But he did understand sometimes when I did wag school because I was going through like a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety and stuff like that. But like we was able to reconnect, and like the love there didn't change. Like it was just like it never left, if you know what I mean. And I found when I came back and I was living with him, like he seemed to be a lot more protective of me and stuff like that. So I think I found the love got stronger.
Well, after you described what the reasons why he may have been abusive towards your mom, maybe he saw that abuse towards you, not to justify that because it's still wrong, but I can see that protection side.
Yeah.
So another question, did you have any trouble with your new stepmother by any chance?
Yeah, that was havoc.
Havoc. How was she about you coming back into the family with him?
She didn't like it. Before we had left to go to Queensland, she was constantly cancelling visits and stuff. She didn't want us around and stuff like that.
So she
But
was
then
trying to get in the way of you and your dad?
yes. When I moved back to Tasmania with him, my other brother was already living with him, because my mum could no longer control my other brother, Jason, not Damo. So he was actually she'd sent him to live with my dad prior to me moving back to Tasmania. So, which the new girlfriend wasn't really impressed, because she then had both me and my brother there with her child and my dad.
And what did that look like? What was her behaviour towards you, Tessa?
She resented us. She resented us like heaps. It wasn't until I got older that I actually started to get along with her a lot better. And because, like I said, my dad actually ended up physically abusing her as well.